woke up looking for the broccoli. High key, keep a horn on me, that could my seat.
What really happens to predators in prison? Let's see what they talking about, bro.
Officer stares, transfixed by the horrific scene before him. His hand slowly moves to cover his mouth as a wave of nausea hits. He gags once, then twice, barely holding it together. In the dimly lit cell, a naked prisoner lies motionless on the floor. Around him, a gruesome mix of blood, shattered skull fragments, and, horrifyingly, a spoon. Lodged in a place no spoon should ever be. In a way, the officer is not surprised. The broken lump of flesh and bones on the floor was once a child predator, a special kind of inmate who regularly suffers the worst fate imaginable in prison. This isn't a scene from a horror movie. It is a real, true story, and perhaps one of the most grisliest incidents ever recorded within prison walls. But before we dive further into this nightmare scenario, let's pull back the curtain on life inside for the predators. No two prisons are alike, and experiences can differ. In the US and in most Western nations, there is an unwritten rule. If you're locked up for preying on children, you are not just unpopular, you are marked. Chomos, chesters, kitty fiddlers, tree jumpers, short eyes, rippers.
Dang. Dang, wait. Oh, shoot. Diddy is barbecue chicken. Diddy is cooked in so many different ways. I ain't know it was like.
Rock spiders, and nonsense. Whatever name you want to give to a predator, at the very least, they will be treated like social pariahs. At worst, well, you'll see what happens soon when prisoners adopt a zero-tolerance policy toward these types of inmates. Let's look at some statistics first. In the United States alone, the sheer scale of incarceration is staggering. Across state prisons, local jails, and federal facilities, nearly 1.9 million people are behind bars in 2024. That's 583 per 100,000. A far higher rate than any other highly developed nation. In case you didn't know, there's a lot of violence in the USA. If we only look at state prisons with just over 1 million inmates, 674,000 of them are in for violent offenses. 168,000 of those people are in for sex offenses.
Oh my gosh.
It doesn't state just how many of them are imprisoned for sex offenses specifically related to young people, but a Johns Hopkins University study in 2021 said there were around 127,000 inmates in the U.S. serving time in state prisons for sex offenses involving children. What this tells us is that U.S. prisons are crawling with sexual predators. The question is, how do this many men hide and avoid a beating? As a former prisoner wrote online, sex offenders, if they're stupid enough to go into a mainline yard, will get got. It almost always is never right away. They might lead the offender to a false sense of security. When you're inducted into a U.S. prison, you have an interview and you'll be asked if there's a reason you can't get placed in the general population. Being a chomo is a hell of a good reason if you don't want to get got. And that's when you can ask to be put in what's called protective custody, or PC. PC is not just a world of like-minded chomos. There's still a lot of dangerous prisoners in there. It's a special part of the prison where you'll also find plenty of snitches and guys who've left street gangs.
I got what you need. Don't screw this. Oh, I ain't gonna lie. So, bro just explained that there are difficulty levels to this. You know what I'm saying? The one where he got out of it, it's like level I'm gonna still say it's bad. He probably got like on level 5 out of 10. So if you go to the general population prison, then he's on level 10. Level 10 difficulty. No exit out. You can't restart the game. You can't change the game mode. You're just stuck. You're cooked until the game ends. You know what I'm saying? So I ain't gonna lie. They should put out a poster for the people getting in prison. No, you know what? Skip that. Cook them. Barbecue chicken.
Now let's take a look at the case of John Gagan, a former Roman Catholic priest who left over 150 boys suffering from decades of trauma. He ended up in Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center in Massachusetts. Even though he was in PC, a fellow prisoner named Joseph Lee Druce stomped his face in and strangled him to death. Just like a guy we'll talk about later, Druce was a killer who went to prison and said he would make it his life's work to hunt predators. These were the men who reminded him of the people who abused him when he was a child. Druce later said he was driven to murder when he heard Gagan share stories of his predatory past. Still, a murder in PC is unlikely.
Bro, this dude like a whole bounty hunter. Yo, this dude took One Piece to a whole nother level. Bro, he actually making it, going out his way to hunt. That will make prison life way more interesting. Considering that you don't have a phone, you don't have life, you don't have media, you don't have grass. This will make it way more interesting, bro.
Prisoner is on parole, they might not want to ruin their chances of getting out. It's more likely a lifer would commit the attack, but there'd be a suspicion if a lifer asked to move to PC. Being attacked is not the only reason why PC isn't a very nice place to be for a convicted Chester. You'll likely be spending 22 to 23 hours a day in your cell. You'll get the same commissary rights, but that's about it. Everything else is restricted. If you go out to the yard, it might just be you alone or in a small group, what they call a bullpen. When you shower, it'll be you alone, taken there in chains like an animal. You'll also likely not be able to work, and you can forget about group educational classes. Okay, so what if someone is a predator but they don't like the idea of all the restrictions in PC? Can they just lie about their crime and fit right into the general population? The answer is no, not likely. When you're the new guy in prison, quite often someone will come into your cell and demand to see your papers. If anywhere
Dang.
on those papers someone sees the letters Joe and Mo, you're not going to have a fun time in that prison. It's almost impossible to hide your conviction in prison, and you won't get through your sentence without anyone ever asking about it. Prisoners have a lot of time on their hands, and they'll want to know what kind of man they're dealing with. If you don't have papers, it's quite easy to find out what you've done, since sentencing information is usually available online. Also, prison officers might just let it slip, since people who hurt women and kids aren't exactly high on the popularity list. And
Yeah.
let's be honest, some officers just like R-rated drama. You will almost certainly not be able to say, oops, I forgot my papers, or the dog ate them, or you lost them. Most likely you'll be assigned a public defender, and with their overloaded caseload, you'll be left handling much of your legal work alone. You'll need to keep those papers close, because if anyone demands to see your charges and you refuse, it's like painting a target on your back, practically shouting, I'm a Chester, please stab me. It depends on which
Dang.
prison you're in, but any former prisoner will tell you that predators do not always get the crap beat out of them or killed. A prisoner might make it through their sentence, but only if they keep their past buried. No bragging, no slip-ups. It's also quite common to extort them, making
I can't fathom a prisoner bragging about a predator bragging about what they did. You know what I'm saying? Now, hey, I can see how I can slip up with, somebody getting your slips and reading the slips, and then you'll be cooked barbecue chicken. But for you to be bragging at the other prisoners, bro, I ain't gonna lie. You need to get whooped, man. I ain't gonna lie to you.
them pay their way out of beatings like a chomo tax. Nonetheless, a former British prisoner who did 7 years in an Arizona prison said the gangs adhered to a KOS system, kill on sight for chomos, another term meaning the offender is fair game for a serious beating and is greenlit. That same guy says guards will often ignore horrific beatings, or at least when they weren't doing the beating themselves. In 2006, Orange County jail officers sat watching cops on TV as a group of inmates beat a software engineer named John Derek Chamberlain to death. The inmates said Chamberlain was a chomo, which wasn't exactly true. Sure, he was guilty of having sketchy content on his computer, but when you're handing out a death sentence, you should probably double-check the finer details. He was murdered over what the courts ruled a misdemeanor. He decided not to divulge his crime, so a shot caller greenlit a beating. 7 men unleashed a savage assault, stomping him relentlessly and violating him with a pencil and a tube of toothpaste. Now they're doing sentences
Wait, hot. Okay, hot tube of toothpaste, bro. I ain't gonna lie. They getting creative with it. I never would have thought.
ranging from 15 years to life. They killed a guy for a lie and in the process ruined their own lives. That's prison logic for you. Here's another fine example. In 2020, at the Larry D. Smith Correctional Facility in Banning, California, a man was beaten to death in his cell. The guy who did it had earlier asked his mother to look online to see what the guy had done. The answer? 100% Chester. Don't get involved in it, she said. No choice, he replied. This guy was serving time for assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer, a serious crime, but he would have gotten out with plenty of life left to live. Now he will spend the rest of his life in prison, without a chance of parole. Some people will literally lose everything to get at predators. You'll see one of the reasons for this in a minute or two. A way to avoid a deadly confrontation is to get yourself put in administrative segregation, ADSEG, although this does come with a number of downsides, so a lot of predators won't do it. ADSEG drives you up the wall due to the sheer loneliness. As a former long-term ADSEG prisoner once said, try locking yourself in a small bathroom and stay in there for half the day. Now imagine how that would feel for 10 years.
Yo,
The intrepid infographic show writer who wrote this video tried it for a whole hour. Let's just say patience and bravery aren't exactly his strong suit. You're in a tiny cell with no radio and no TV. It's you and 4 bare walls. No
like, bro,
internet.
imagine, bro, you literally set yourself up to go insane. I don't care, just sitting in the bathroom, sitting in the cell, doing nothing for half of the whole day, bro. Your imagination got to be off the
There's no
charts.
bars on the door to look through, just you and your mind. Maybe a book to read if you're lucky. They don't even allow you to keep your mattress to lie on during the day. You might only get 3 to 4 hours out of your cell in a whole week. When you do get yard time, it's either the bullpen or a fenced-in space underneath a roof.
That's
So you
crazy.
might never see the sky or feel a warm breeze blow across your face. Food is delivered to you through a slot in the door. If you go to shower, you turn around and put your hands through the slot to be handcuffed. When you sleep, it's often to the sound of screams. It is quite simply torture. But if you're a targeted chomo and you can't immediately get placed in PC, this might be your only option. Let's say you ignore the warnings and stay in the general population to tough it out. What's the absolute worst that can happen? In the UK, chomo intolerance is just as strict as it is in the US. Yet the most
Chomo
brutal
and
stories
Tyler.
we found come from England, the land of good manners, beans on toast, and apparently some shockingly vicious attacks on nonsense. In 2012, a 33-year-old male prisoner in Durham prison was described by a psychiatrist as a remorseless, callous psychopath who harbors cannibalistic urges. He and another prisoner, 24, lured a 23-year-old guy into a cell. This young man had been sentenced in 2011 for predatory actions involving a 13-year-old girl. Once he was in the cell, the 2 men proceeded to hold him down and, amongst other things, slice him up with a razor blade. They took a pen and pushed it into one of his eyeballs. Once he was dead, they disemboweled him. When asked later why they chose this particular man, when they had scores of other predators to choose from, one of them said they just fancied doing it. As is often the case with extreme prison violence, the perpetrators are not usually heroes intent to clean up society, but maniacs who just want an excuse to keep hurting people. The older guy in this attack was serving 24 years for sneaking through a window in a nursing home for vulnerable women. He attacked 2 of the women, one in her 50s and one in her 70s, who were
Okay, okay. I want to know how much amount of brain cells and what type of brain cells did he have to consume him to go to a nursing home and attack 4 sleeping women? Like, what was the objective, gang? I,
sharing a room.
I'm
He
genuinely
suffocated
curious,
one and
bro.
brutally assaulted the other. This was certainly no hero with a profound sense of ethics. Many of the men who hurt predators in prison are doing it because someone hurt them when they were young. Statistics show us that the rates of childhood abuse, both physical and sexual, are higher among prisoners than on the outside. This brings us to Robert Maudsley, a man often called Britain's scariest prisoner. In 1974, he murdered a man who'd shown him photos of children he'd hurt, and he was sent to the infamous psychiatric hospital Broadmoor.
Come on,
In
bro.
1977, he tortured a fellow patient for 9 hours, intermittently sticking the man's bloodied head to the window to show the staff what he was doing. This victim, like Motley's first victim, had hurt children. When the staff finally opened the door, an officer said the victim's head had been, quote, cracked open like a boiled egg. A spoon had been pushed through the man's ear and deep into his head. The rumor soon spread.
Yo, that has to be the most sharpest spoon. Like, how can you what, bro?
That Maudsley had eaten the man's brain, which wasn't true, but the tabloids went ahead and nicknamed him the cannibal and the brain eater. Too dangerous for the hospital, Maudsley was sent to Wakefield Prison, aka Monster Mansion, a place infamous for sexual predators. Suffice it to say, given his reputation as a cannibal, he didn't get so much grief from the other prisoners. In 1978, he took his French teacher, a convicted predator, to his cell, where he strangled him and stabbed him to death. Maudsley hid the body under his bed. He then called out to the landing and asked if anyone wanted to join him in his cell. Unsurprisingly, no one took him up on the offer, so he went hunting. He planned to murder 7 men, all predators. You probably already guessed Maudsley himself was an abused child. This was revenge. He walked into a
Wow.
guy's cell, locked the door, and proceeded to hack at him with a knife. Unable to convince anyone to come have a chat with him, he calmly walked down the hallway as prisoners
Do they not give them plastic knives in prison? I know that you can still do some hot damage with that. But okay, why did the
Parted out
knife
the
look
Red Sea.
look
He then
made
went to
out
the
of
staff office and
not
informed the
plastic?
guards that they should expect 2 fewer men at roll call that night. Too dangerous even for prison, he was later moved to the basement where he's still rotting away to this day in a specially made transparent Perspex cage. The authorities have refused his request for a bird as a companion. The rules state not even the officers can speak to him. He once wrote in a letter, "I am left to stagnate, vegetate, and to regress, left to confront my solitary head-on with people who have eyes, but don't see, and who have ears, but don't hear, who have mouths, but don't speak."
That nigga, that nigga been in prison for so long. He turned into Dr. Seuss. Why is he writing poems like these?
Requested
Bro is
cyanide,
really
but the
cooked.
British authorities are too kind to let
Barbecue.
him die. He's described as gentle and kind with a genius-level IQ. He loves classical music, poetry, and art. So now you know where the idea of Hannibal Lecter comes
What I was
from.
about to say.
He blames his
That makes
parents
sense.
for the murders he committed, once saying, "When I kill, I think I have my parents in mind. If I had killed my parents in 1970, none of these people need have died." So, if a predator ever finds himself in prison, he should know there are Robert Maudsleys around who can't wait to meet them. Prison has its own brutal justice, but does it go too far? Drop your thoughts below. Now, you need to hear the full story.
Yo, I did not know that
Man is dragged.
I ain't know that people be on that type of timing, bro.